is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalohungva. Here are the headlines for Wednesday, July 1st, 2020. 4 Alaska men who spent 18 years in prison for a murder they did not commit are one step closer to receiving compensation for their wrongful imprisonment. There are millions of dollars at stake for George Freese, Marvin Roberts, Eugene Vent, who are all at the Baskin, and Kevin Pease, who is the fourth defendant. Together, they became known as the Fairbanks Four. They were between the ages of 17 and 20 when they were arrested for murder in 1997. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed an earlier decision by a 3-judge panel allowing the Fairbanks Four to sue the city of Fairbanks. In 2012, a man serving time for a different crime confessed to the murder. 3 years later, the Fairbanks Four were released from prison, but one condition for their release was to sign an affidavit saying they would not sue for wrongful convictions. The men say their signatures were coerced and they filed for compensation. Ultimately, a jury will decide whether compensation is due and set the award amount. In the past, juries have awarded hundreds of millions of dollars. Election Day 2020 is just 4 months away, and Joe Biden is now looking for a tribal engagement director. The Democratic National Committee posted the job description this week. The duties include managing a national outreach program to tribes. The person must have a record of demonstrated engagement with tribal communities. Biden's campaign website lays out his history of working with tribes and mentions he will build on the progress made under the Obama-Biden administration. Colorado river guides and tourists are not welcomed on the Havasupai tribal lands in Arizona. The Grand Canyon National Park is allowing its first trips of the season down that river. The tribe is telling river guides to stay off their lands. The reservation is located at the bottom of the Grand Canyon's south rim. The tribe has not had any positive COVID-19 cases and is not equipped to handle an outbreak due to their remote location. It's an 8-mile trek down into the canyon to get to the reservation. The tribe has banned all visitors to its popular waterfalls since March 15th. They are known for the popular hikes to Havasu Falls, Mooney Falls, and beyond that to Beaver Falls. Beaver Falls has been contentious because it's right on the border of the reservation. Grand Canyon National Park spokesperson Joelle Baird says the park shares the tribe's objective to have no contact between river runners and the tribe during this pandemic. The tribe will have officers stationed at the reservation boundary to ensure that visitors do not go beyond that point. And now for an update on COVID-19 cases in Indian Country, let's go to our Washington editor, Jordan Bennett-Begay. Jordan?
Yata Patty, Yata Shikisto Shidine. We have COVID-19 updates from 6 tribes around the country, plus a warning from the nation's top infectious disease expert. Here's a look at the latest numbers from our database. There are 11,895 positive cases and 486 deaths in the Indian health system. Again, that is a total of 11,895 positive cases and 486 deaths as of July 1st. In North Carolina, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians saw 7 more cases and 1 death. The tribe has a total of 71 cases and 2 deaths. In Oklahoma, the Cherokee Nation reported an additional 8 cases. This gives the tribe a total of 208 cases overall. The Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians in Mississippi saw an increase of 5 cases and 1 more death. The tribe has a total of 921 cases and 65 deaths. In the Colorado River Indian tribes in Arizona reported 14 new cases and 1 more death. This was the second COVID-19 related death for the tribe within the last week, and the tribe has a total of 243 cases and 2 deaths. In Arizona, also, the White Mountain Apache tribe continues to see an increase. They have 30 more cases, giving the tribe a total of 1,741 cases and 22 deaths. And the Navajo Nation actually saw 17 new cases and 1 more death. And the tribe did announce that they are implementing 3 more weekend lockdowns and more may follow. And President Jonathan Nez said that the data indicates that these strict precautionary measures are improving their numbers. And for the country as a whole, Dr. Anthony Fauci said that the country is going in the wrong direction, and he would not be surprised if we see an increase of cases daily.
Wow, this second wave is really hitting Indian country. Jordan Benbigay, thank you so much.
Yeah, Patty.
And we'll be right back.
This is Indian Country Today.
Welcome back. As we near the 4th of July holiday in the midst of this global pandemic, we're also just 4 months away from election 2020. Here today to talk about some of the stories making headlines are two reporters, producers for Indian Country Today. Colby Kicking Woman is based in Washington, D.C., and he's been on the Supreme Court beat as well as following the civil uprising across the country. Welcome, Colby.
Hi, Patty. Thanks for having me.
Also joining us is Aaliyah Chavez, who is based in Phoenix. She's covering all things election 2020. Welcome, Aaliyah.
Great to be here, Patty.
Well, Aaliyah, you had a late night covering primaries, and you've been covering the primaries leading up to the general election. What are the headlines this morning from last night's primaries?
Indeed, Indian Country Today was following 20 Native candidates on Tuesday night, all of which had primary elections. The candidates came from 3 states, including Oklahoma, Colorado, and Utah. Most notably, however, we followed 4 Native candidates who are seeking bids to Congress. All of them won their primary elections last night and will be on the ballot in November. Oklahoma is going to be a particularly exciting place to watch come November, where voters will have to choose between a Democrat and a Republican who are both Cherokee. Danielle Lanier, a Democrat, is looking to fill the shoes of current Republican Congressman Mark Wayne Mullen, who is seeking his 5th term in Congress. In Oklahoma's 4th district, Republican Congressman Tom Cole of the Chickasaw Nation won his primary election last night, and he is seeking his 10th re-election bid to Congress. In Utah, Darren Perry, who is a Democrat, is looking to flip an open House seat. As of Wednesday morning, he is ahead in his primary election, having 52% of the vote with 74% precincts reporting. And he's looking to make a really big splash if he wins. The 1st congressional district there in Utah has not elected a Democrat to Congress in 42 years. So if he wins, that would definitely be an upset for the Republican Party. We will be watching that race closely on November 3rd.
And tell me again, what was the latest count for Darren Perry's race? How close is that margin?
He's winning his election as of Wednesday morning with 52% of the vote. And really something that I was watching closely last night was voter turnout. As most people may know or may not know, Utah is a really Republican-leaning state. And so to be running as a Democrat in an open congressional seat is a big deal. He was winning by about 800 votes this morning, which is, really a situation you don't see very often. So his race hasn't been called, but Indian Country Today will be closely watching what happens there.
And we'll follow updates on Indian Country Today, the platform there. And in this time of COVID and campaigning, we know that candidates have been forced to not knock on doors or hold events and such. How did he campaign and get out that vote?
I spoke to him on Monday, and it was the day before his election, and he said, no candidate could have ever seen coming how to campaign in a pandemic. And he said that he used all of the other tools that we're hearing around Indian country and really across the nation, in terms of utilizing virtual video calls, social media. He has a team of about 10 people. And so he said that, they were doing everything that they possibly could to get the word out virtually. I did speak to him Monday, and he said that his campaign was going to be hosting a small campaign party for just him and his team. And it seemed like they were just going to have a nice dinner and watch numbers come in. So I'm sure he's still anxiously awaiting to find out the decision in terms of if he'll advance to November or not.
And for all the candidates, how do they watch those returns? Because in the past, it's tradition to have a big, watch party and invite your supporters in and see, the ballots as they come in. So how are the other candidates faring in this pandemic and campaigning?
When we started election season, we had 19 Native candidates running for office. And so far, 4 of them have lost their primary elections and are out of the running, but 8 have qualified for the general election. And, moving forward, we're following 7 more candidates who are running in primaries that are mostly happening in August. And they're from the states of Hawaii, Kansas, Minnesota, Wyoming, and Alaska. So depending on how things end up, there's a possibility of having 15 Native candidates running for Congress in the general election, which is a really, really big deal. So definitely something to look forward to come November.
Wow, that's a huge number, considering how in the past elections there have not been a lot of Native Americans running for office, whether it's a national office or a state office. Do you have any numbers on that? The increase, it seems like a significant increase in a short amount of time in terms of election cycles. What has been that increase?
Definitely. In 2018, we had the big winners of the congressmen, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland. And so to be able to be going into 2018 with the possibility of 10 plus Native candidates who have a very real shot of being elected to Congress is a really big deal. It would not only raise the representation of Native people in Washington, but also, just I think paves the way for more people in the future. Something else that's really interesting is that a lot of the Native candidates who are running for Congress are running for the United States House of Representatives. There's only, I believe off of the top of my head, there's only 2 running for the United States Senate. And there's never been a Native person in the Senate before. So that will be a really big deal if that happens. The 2 people running for Senate are Yvette Harrell out of New Mexico and Paulette Jordan in Idaho.
And so it's interesting, the representation in the Senate and also the Congress. Sharice Davids represents a district in Kansas that has no Native reservations and such, but she is one of the first 2 women in Congress who is a Native woman. Ben Nighthorse Campbell served in the Senate for a number of years. I believe he's Cheyenne out of Colorado. So you have, and also Daniel Inouye from Hawaii, Indigenous Native Hawaiian man who served. So, but it's interesting to look at and see how you have this progression, just a few for the very beginning, like Tom Cole, he's served for many years now, and he's going for, what is his election? What is this next term?
His 10th term.
His 10th term, wow. So, we're watching and looking and seeing how the Native representation is there at the election booth. In the past primary you covered, talk a little bit about that, catch us up to what happened in North Dakota and Nevada.
Well, first, I want to correct that statement. Thank you for catching that. There's never been a Native woman in the United States Senate, which is what I meant to say. And we have 2 Native women who could potentially be elected to the Senate in November. So that was the point that I was trying to make there. Yes, in New Mexico, it was a pretty big deal. On June 2nd, there was a number of states who had their primary elections, and we followed 5 Native candidates who were running for Congress. The only 2 that won those elections were incumbent Congresswoman Deb Haaland and the newcomer out of New Mexico as well, Yvette Harrell. So that was an exciting night. We also followed a number of legislative races across South Dakota and New Mexico. And so we're not only following, I should mention, federal races, but also statewide elections. And so Indian Country Today very much welcomes if anyone out there has any insight into Native candidates who might be running for office, definitely contact us. My email is on all of the stories that I file. What we're trying to do is build a comprehensive database of every Native candidate running for office. And I can tell you right now that it's a Google spreadsheet that we have, and we're always looking to fill more rows, regardless of party affiliation, regardless of what state they're in. We're even following, city council races. If you know of a Native person who's running for public office, we want to know about it. Being able to document these candidates is a really big deal. And, as time moves on, hopefully we can sort of see the progression that you were talking about in terms of how many people are running for office, by which party, by what gender, by what tribe. And so it's really building the database now to be able to track that data over time.
Yes, and it's exciting to watch the races as they happen, the primaries leading up to the general election, and then of course in this pandemic, there's that extra challenge of trying to campaign, and then on top of that, we have civil unrest. Did any of the candidates talk about that, about how they were addressing the Black Lives Matter movement or the removal of Confederate statues and also statues of colonizers such as Christopher Columbus and Oñate, others? Did they talk about that during their campaigns?
And last night, the candidates who ran for Tuesday's primary elections, that really wasn't a big topic that they addressed. I know that, for Darren Perry, the Democrat running in Utah, a big thing that he spoke about was, his priority to prioritize public lands. He estimated that over 80% of land in Utah is owned by the federal government. And so he talked a lot about, going back to stories that his grandmother told him. He's a Shoshone tribal member. And he talked a lot about the importance of caring for the land. And he said, I'm running here now, but I'm also running with the intent of thinking about my children and grandchildren and future generations.
Wow, very good. Well, Aaliyah, we'll come back to you in a minute here, but Colby, you certainly have been in the middle of all kinds of reporting on the civil unrest, and that reached Washington, D.C., and of course came right smack back down to the Washington football team. Tell us what's been happening.
Yeah, so since the death of George Floyd, we all know that discussions on race and racial equality have been happening nationwide, and that has renewed calls for the Washington NFL team and team owner Dan Snyder to change the name from their racial slur mascot. There was a study that was published on June 8th in the Race, Ethnicity, and Educational Journal that stated that Native themed mascots only cause harm, especially to Native youth. And so it's been very interesting to see the renewed calls. If you're on social media, there has been, videos and images by Illuminative calling for the team to change the name, and it's definitely gained a lot of steam.
Well, that's been a campaign that's been going on for a number of years, but this recent movement has really pushed forward the issue. Tell us about how the decision came about to remove the statue of the founder of the team.
Yeah, so the founding team owner, his name was George Preston Marshall, and he was the last, the Washington football team was the last team to integrate in 1962, and he was a known segregationist, I believe. And so they removed his statue from the old Washington Stadium at RFK Stadium in DC. And they're also removing his name from the Ring of Fame within FedEx Field. That's also an issue that the DC City Council has taken up, that if when the team wants to build a new stadium, if they want to build it within DC city limits, that they might need to change the name before that happens.
And do you know where that call to remove the statue and also remove his name inside the stadium, did that come from the NFL, or where did that come from?
No, I think they were trying to be proactive in removing it, which is kind of ironic that they'll remove the statue of a segregationist, but can't see that their name is a racial slur and change that. So yeah.
And there are allies in this movement too. Some actors, some people from Hollywood have signed on.
Yeah, Spike Lee, famous director, and comedian D.L. Hughley are two celebrities that have called for the Washington team to change their name. Taika Waititi, indigenous director, has also been outspoken about it. So it's definitely gaining a lot of momentum.
And I believe even the Washington Post editorial board wrote an editorial about this, which in the past, the editorial pages have not been so much behind a name change.
Yeah, the Washington Post was criticized for a study that they put out a number of years ago, saying that the majority of Native Americans aren't offended by the team name. That's been debunked since. The Native American Journalists Association also joined other Journalists Association of people of color calling for all media outlets to not use the Native themed mascots in their images or the team name in writing.
And that's also why we're not saying the name, because it is a racial a slur, and so and I think we're doing just fine. I think everybody knows that we're talking about the Washington NFL football team, and NAJA has long called for journalists, and especially sports journalists, to report but not say that name, and the reporting can still be accurate. And I think again we're showing that in even our conversation here. Now the president of the National Congress of American Indians made a direct appeal to the players, which is a different tactic than we've seen in the past. Talk a little bit about that. Instead of approaching the owner, Dan Snyder, she went directly to the players.
Yeah, so National Congress of American Indians President Fawn Sharp, she equated the team name to the Confederate flag. And, we've seen, like you said, statues of Confederate generals and soldiers come down. And so she called for players to take a knee or not play at all until the team name is changed. And that would certainly force the hand of Dan Snyder, as well as people have called for Commissioner Roger Goodell and other team owners to put pressure on Snyder to change the name.
Well, in all things, many things, it boils down to money, to economics. There is a campaign that would affect the economics of the team. What is that, and how do you think that might change it? In your reporting, what have you found?
Yeah, so on Friday, there was a group of 88 investors that have over, I believe, $620 billion in assets, and they sent letters to FedEx, PepsiCo, and Nike, calling for them to terminate all business relationships with the team until the name was changed. That is certainly one way to go about it. I think the NFL amassed over $1.5 billion in advertising last year. And so if there's one area where these owners feel the pain, it's in their wallet. And so maybe that campaign will also turn the pressure up.
And has Nike gotten back to you at all? Because again, Nike supported Colin Kaepernick with his campaign to take a knee before NFL games. And they've supported him, but they haven't made a statement, to our knowledge, unless they've gone back to you recently about pressuring the NFL to change that too.
No, I did not receive a response from Nike. They did release a statement on the Black Lives Matter movement, and they have their collaboration with N7, but I have not heard back in regards to terminating their business relationships with the team.
All right. Well, Colby, very interesting. What else is on your horizon to cover?
Well, like the rest of Indian country, we've been sitting on pins and needles waiting for this McGirt decision to come down from the Supreme Court. It'll be the first time I think I saw since 1996 that decisions will be released in July. And so just waiting patiently.
And checking the SCOTUS blog every Monday and Thursday when they release opinions?
And they released decisions yesterday. So occasionally the court will add days. So we'll see.
Okay. Well, Colby Kicking Woman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. And Aaliyah, what's next on your reporter's tablet?
Well, I'll be gearing up for elections come November. I'm working on writing some really great profiles on candidates just so Indian country can get to know them a little bit better. One candidate that I'm particularly excited about, his name is Kai Kahele, and he's from the state of Hawaii. And if he wins, he'll be the first Native Hawaiian to serve in Congress since Daniel Inouye, and that's a pretty big deal. If we are talking about Native representation in Indian country, we also need to talk about Native Hawaiians and their representation in Congress as well. So I'm looking forward to writing some really great profiles on the candidates and just gearing up for November.
All right. Well, Aaliyah Chavez, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us an update on your reporting.
Thanks, Patty.
And thank you for watching Indian Country Today. Take care of yourselves. Your life is precious. I'm Patty Thalohungva. Join us again tomorrow.
This is Indian Country Today.